one more. Yes. Okay, Lisa first. Oh no, there's one more chair. There is one more chair. It's just empty. There was enough chairs. Starts when? 3:15. Yeah, probably at 3:15.
Okay, so if everybody can come in, then we can get started with our program for the afternoon. So we will have a panel this afternoon, What Can the World Learn from the Last 30 Years of German Direct Democracy. So we have very interesting speakers who joined us from Germany. But before that, we will, of course, as we did this morning, have democratic notes from cities. And the first person who is here is Ania Reitel-Warsowa from Tri-City, Poland.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Bruno. And thank you all who got involved in the organization of that forum. For invitation and allowing me to say a few words about my hometown. Actually, Tri-City is not one city, it's a metropolitan area in the north of Poland, just by the Baltic Sea, which consists of 3 cities: Gdansk, very historical one, Sopot, which is the most famous Polish resort, and Gdynia, a very important port city. In the context of local participatory democracy, I can say that Tri-City is the leader in Poland, and a lot of institutions for the first time were just implemented in Gdansk, in Sopot and Gdynia, and then they were followed by the other cities in Poland. Because we are short of time, I will just mention these instruments that we have in Tri-City. First of all, we have local referendum. This is the only instrument of direct democracy at the local level that's regulated by the constitution, by the national law, and unfortunately it's not very effective because of very restrictive formal requirements concerning the validity of the referendum, concerning the referendum initiative. So it's not used very often. In Tri-City we had only one referendum. It was a referendum of recall nature that took place in Sopot in 2009. It was aimed to recall the president of the city, and it was valid, and most of people supported the president, so he kept his office. The second instrument is popular initiative at the local level, not regulated by the national law, but regulated by the local law. All 3 cities have adopted such regulations. And because it depends on local regulation, so there are differences, in particular when it comes to the number of signatures that must support such initiative. In Gdansk it's 2,000, in Sopot it's 200. Still, in both cases it equals to 0.6 of all eligible voters. In Gdynia it's only 500, which equals to 0.2. So the requirements are not very high, but again it's not very effective. First of all, it's not well advertised. A lot of people are not aware of such possibility. And the other reason is that it's still a kind of agenda initiative, so people keep in mind that it's always the local authority to decide finally whether a particular proposal should be adopted or not. Next interesting instrument is participatory budgeting. I won't talk about that because the afternoon workshop is devoted to that issue. Just to mention that the first examples of participatory democracy, participatory budgeting in Poland took place in Sopot in 2011, and then it spread to the whole Poland. And the newest participatory instrument that we have in Gdansk is Citizens Panel. So since 2016, people chosen by a lot can consider important issues. For example, the Citizens Panel in Gdansk were devoted to the problem how to prevent flooding in Gdansk, how to protect the environment, how to keep fresh air, how to encourage people to participate at the local level. And just to make a final remark, it's important to say, to notice that all instruments of participatory democracy that are effective in Tricity have had a bottom-up nature. So these were activists from urban movements who put a lot of effort to prepare the proposals, even to prepare drafts of laws allowing for implementation of participatory budgeting of citizens panels, who spend a lot of time going to council meetings and individual city council members. We have a very difficult political situation in Poland, very deep constitutional crisis, and paradoxically, it also helped to develop participatory democracy, because local authorities in Gdansk are from the opposition party towards the ruling party that violates the constitution, and they seek people's support. So they are very open and they are very likely to listen to people and to respond positively for their proposals, concerning also participatory democratic instruments. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We will now have a contribution from Brno in Czech Republic by Patrick Dolezal.
Buongiorno tutti.
Good morning to everybody.
Thanks to changes in the Brno City Hall after the last municipal elections was possible after years of efforts to start implementing participatory proposals and measures. Because it was a brand new agenda, a new Office of Participation was established and staffed at the same time. Negotiations were held on the allocation of part of the annual municipal budget for participatory purposes. This preparatory phase lasted for 2 years, and now, for 2 more years, the participation is in progress. During these years, we successfully faced civil childhood ailments, ranging from informing and motivating residents to deliberating and voting. Now, according to the number of people involved and financial means, Brno is the most participating city in the Czech Republic. The current form of participation in Brno is based on the principle of citizens' initiative. Anyway, proposals of people are currently implemented only on a small part of the city budget. Actually, it's €1,200,000, but it's growing every year. We also try to expand our participation by simplifying registration to vote, and we are thinking about voting options for other users of the city. In order to ensure a true representative participation, now non-residents can design projects, but only people with permanent residence can vote. We would like to be able to co-create the look of the city also for people who usually move there to work and study. In any case, it makes sense to push democratic participation because only a functional community can face the new challenges of a globalized world. From citizens' point of view, it's necessary to feel the justice and meaningfulness of the community. Everyone needs a sense of belonging, sense of having value, and contributes to securing the future. The role of the community is to provide the conditions for such a feeling. This means for the municipalities, the support of an effective neighboring environment, the possibility of recognizing and satisfying the needs of its inhabitants. Thanks. From our point of view, or from my point of view, only good communication and cooperation between city representatives, city officials, and citizens can guarantee true success. All these groups are often distrustful to participation for a variety of reasons, but this resistance can be overcome mainly by the rapid realization of projects. And what's more, in our experience, we also have the positive effects and consequences we didn't expect. Officials, thanks to the variety of projects, work with many different unions, and this in turn means a better overview of processes and better cooperation within the municipal office. Representatives are better oriented in the opinion and needs of citizens, and citizens enjoy faster implementation of public projects. and everyone can benefit from the feeling of participation in meaningful events in the city. Thanks for your attention.
The Czech Republic are new leaders at 3 minutes and 34 seconds to tune us out of the top spot.
And one final note will be shared from Nashville by Paul Jacob.
Thank you. Nashville, Tennessee is known as Music City. It's the capital of country music in the United States. But though the city has direct democracy, there is a discordant note. In 1994, citizens gathered thousands of signatures and put a term limit measure on the ballot. 76% of Nashvillians voted yes for a two-term limit for their city council. But just 2 years later, the council put a measure on the ballot to weaken that limit from 2 terms to 3 terms. Voters said no. Then, 2 years after that, in 1998, the council put a measure on the ballot to abolish the term limits. Voters said no. Then, 4 years after that, in 2002, the council again put a measure on the ballot to weaken the term limits from 2 terms to 3 terms. Voters said, you guessed it, no. In 2015, there were 2 measures on the ballot to weaken term limits. One was put on the ballot by the council, and then there was a second measure that combined a weakening of term limits from 2 terms to 3, along with a reduction in the size of the city council from 40 to 27 seats. Asked by a reporter, this second measure was led by a councilwoman who was about to be termed out of office. Asked by a reporter why the reduction in the terms or an increase in term limits, a weakening, was combined with a reduction in the in the number of council members, she told the reporter, we had to give the voters something. Both measures went down to defeat, no and no, 1,000 times no. This year, 2018, this November, like a broken record, Music City politicians are back. They have a new ballot measure that will, you guessed it, weaken term limits. Now, I predict that voters will again say no. In fact, they might even put a word before no. But isn't enough enough? I have suggested to the term limit supporters in Nashville that they borrow an idea from a neighboring state. In Arkansas, there's a term limit measure on the ballot this year that not only makes the term limits stronger, it also removes the issue of term limits from the legislature entirely. Today, the Arkansas legislature could offer an amendment on any issue in the Constitution. But if this measure passes, they will be able to offer an amendment and propose it to the voters for any issue except for their own term limits. Why do this? Well, for a simple reason. The voters have had enough, and the people are sovereign, not the politicians.
And so before we learn of 30 years of direct democracy in Germany, I would just like to remind you all that it is still possible to sign up for a very exciting project that we're launching with Democracy International in the room behind here. We are creating a platform for everybody working on direct democracy around the world, an online platform, and you can learn all about it if you stop by in the room behind here. And then.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? First, I want to congratulate Paul Jacob. That was the shortest speech ever given by anyone from the state of Arkansas in the history of the world. So thank you. 4 minutes. Okay, so this is a panel about Germans, and I want to say for the record to defend these folks, none of these people asked me to do this panel. This is not their opportunity. This is my idea, okay? And my motive was very simple: revenge. For years now, my colleague, my co-president Bruno Kaufmann and I have done these forums and things, and we always hear so much about some very wonderful and small countries. Switzerland and Uruguay and Tunisia, even Sweden, both of the countries of my friend Bruno. And you know, it's great. They're great models and much lessons to be learned. But you know, I've been saying to Bruno for years, it's a joke, you know, those are wonderful countries, Bruno, but they all have fewer people than Los Angeles County. When are we going to talk about some real countries? So today, this is, yes, exactly, big size. Sorry, my apologies. I know there are many more small countries than big. But today is a great day. We heard about Italy, and now we heard about Germany. Today is a dream come true for me as your Global Forum co-president. And because the German case intrigues me, you know, lots of different states, and I don't know, do we have the slide with the map? We should probably put that up there. But this is an interesting case. A lot has happened in Germany in direct democracy, good and bad, in these last 30 years. And I felt like I've heard it from each of these people in very interesting and even fun ways, visiting them, but I've never heard the whole story told in a forum. So that's what we're going to try to get close to doing now. I also have to relay a message from Xishuan Yu, who's a wonderful, compelling young Taiwanese scholar who's been studying in Germany, was supposed to be on this panel. She asked me to have her regrets, that a health issue came up that made her unable to travel. We have gone to substitute as someone to represent, you know, that part of the world which has the misfortune to not be Germany. Dane Waters of the Initiative and Referendum Institute, who works around the world and mostly is now in Myanmar, literally saving elephants. But we will get to him later. I want to start by going backwards in time. And this is just we're going to try to make this fun and fast-paced. So this is a very short question with like a 15-second answer. Where were each of you in 1989, 88, when, you know, the fall of 88 and early 90, 30 years ago now? Where were each of you? I'll go first. I was a freshman in high school at the Polytechnic School in Pasadena, California. Where were you, Roman?
I was sitting in Munich, yeah, and didn't realize where East Germany is.
Really? Claudine, where were you in 1980?
Oh my God. Just finished with the school in the north of Germany.
Okay.
And I come from Bavaria, but in 1989 I already lived in Hamburg and tried to recover from the shock that people in Hamburg had less participation rights than in my old home country, Bavaria, where a citizens' initiative and referendum laws existed since 1946.
Okay.
I was happy enough to be near the border in Kassel, in the town of Kassel, with my girlfriend, and she's the mother of, for example, the beautiful Antonia sitting there, my daughter. And then right away we saw all the very famous DDR cars, Trabi and so, driving through, and we were waving and even kissing and hugging. It was very great in Kassel because all the people came through the border driving, and so it was great.
Michael?
Shall I do?
Yeah. Leave it to an American.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. You know how to, always. In 1988, I haven't heard something about direct democracy. I wasn't so much interested in falling the wall in Germany. I was very egoistic because I have been in France at that time winning a prize from an American company, Kodak. I had been a photographer at that time, and I won the European Kodak Award, and I was like crazy about that, and hadn't any aim on other things. So I'm sorry about that, but after that I quit after a time these kind of work because I then entdecken, what does it mean in English? The English word? I discovered direct democracy, and I discovered an artist, Joseph Beuys, again, which had been a famous artist in Germany, and I was connected when I was studying 20 years before 1988. 89.
Do you want me to answer that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh. I was in Alabama. We had never heard of Germany at the time, so.
Fair enough. Okay, so we've heard all of you, from Roman Huber to Claudine Nierth to Angelica Gardner, Daniel Schilly, Michael van der Loo, and Dane Waters. So my question is now, and I'm going to start with you, Daniel. Where was German direct democracy in 1989? You know, how limited was it?
Yeah, we had somehow a good state, Bavaria. On the Bavaria country level, they had different ballot initiatives about garbage law and so on. They were pretty busy since the end of World War II, because the first prime minister of Bavaria was a refugee in Switzerland, and he introduced very good instrument on the country level for direct democracy. But other countries had some elements also on the country level. Only in Baden-Württemberg was local direct democracy, only in Baden-Württemberg. So it was
two of the 16 states.
Yeah, but yeah.
I'd love to get the slide with the map of Germany and all its states.
But maybe in 1988, something very important happened. There was a big crisis in a Nordic country, Schleswig-Holstein. And one of the first tasks of the new movement, More Democracy, which was exactly at this year founded, we had the first task to write a new constitution, to help to write a new constitution of Schleswig-Holstein, and they introduced
one of the states, yeah.
In 1988.
There's 16 states in Germany, right?
Yeah.
So two had it.
Now we say 17. One is Mallorca, but the Spanish don't know it.
Fair enough. So let's get into these 30 years then. And the reason I want to do this is really this question. So many people here come from countries where they feel stuck. They want to have direct democracy. The people want it. We've heard it. They may even have rules of it, but it is not happening, not spreading. And here it has spread. Not perfectly, not without many challenges and future problems that need to be dealt with, which we'll get to. But going chronologically, I want to ask each of you, what is your story of what has happened in these 30 years? How did you get from 2 states to 16 states? And feel free to talk about your own work in this, where you enter the narrative in this 30-year period. This is Roman Huber, as the Executive Director of More Democracy.
Yeah. So I start with Bavaria. And this was in 1993. It started because we are all tired about collecting signatures and demonstrating and saying and begging the politicians. So the More Democracy went from Bonn, which was since the capital, to Munich, and we started there a campaign to introduce initiative and referenda on a local level. And there was the organization founded More Democracy in Bavaria. And at that time, the state party, the Christian Socialists, got regularly, since decades, 50% and more votes. So they are really ruling the country. And in that time, when you went on the telephone and when you said, hello, this is More Democracy in Bavaria, there was always silence. Or people started laughing. What is this, democracy in Bavaria? And then we used the initiative and referendum law on the state level. And this means you have to collect 10% of the voters in 2 weeks. That means 900,000 signatures in 2 weeks, but you can't collect the signature on the street, but you have to motivate the people to go to the town hall and sign there. So that's the threshold. And we made then 1.2 million people to sign this petition. This was really awesome. And then we got 60% in the referendum itself. And this was really a shock for everybody, and mostly for us. And so we introduced initiative and referenda on a local level, and since that, we had 3,000 initiatives on the local level and 1,700 referenda on a local level alone in Bavaria.
Okay. So, Claudine, the question to you, you were working, you're obviously an artist, a political activist, you were working, your bio said in the 1980s, supporting something I've never heard of, the Aktion Volksentscheid, is that correct? Did I get that right?
Yes, very old.
The first national action for direct democracy. So that's where you enter the story. What is the story of how did we get here, and what have you worked on particularly in this spread of direct democracy in Germany?
That's right. I'm involved around more than 30 years in these issues, and I can say never give up. Never give up. Never give up. Thanks. And in my opinion, my experience is I've imitated 4 citizen initiatives in Germany. And all the 5 was very successful. Why? What we can learn. At first, we start to find an alliance with another partners, with around 10 NGOs, maybe more, so that we can say, that we can show you are not alone. You have a lot of partners. You understand? Yeah. And then we start to collect the supporters, the signatures, and then we start to go in contact with the government and with the parliament. Mm-hmm. And this is a very important point because we speak to each other. And we speak to each other very truthful with trust, confidence, trust, not aggressive. And mostly in 3 times of my initiatives, we find a solution without vote. So we find an agreement together, we find a solution together, and from this point we start a good relationship of trust, of working together. And now, this is a point for me today in Germany, we have to find a good combine of the 3 elements, the process in parliament, deliberate formats, and the directly democracy. So we have to put them together. And then we start in a new culture of democracy.
Let me, thank you for getting today. We're going to keep it in the past because we're going to talk a lot about today and the future. Thank you. Angelica, you're a journalist. You worked in Hamburg. Direct democracy helped you deliver this globally significant transparency law. But what is the narrative for you? How did you get it in Hamburg? And what worked in getting it? And Hamburg is both a state and a city, for those who don't know it.
As I mentioned before, I grew up in Bavaria, and the first time I took part in an initiative referendum was in the 60s. when the people wanted to reduce church influence in public schools. And of course the churches and the Christian Conservative Party and the state government were totally against that. But the people won by far. So from that moment on, I was convinced that people are not dumber than their representatives. But in 1981, I moved to Hamburg, and as I said before, there was nothing of that sort. The people did not have any influence on politics, but we had to wait till 1996 in Hamburg, when Hamburg was the last one of the 16 states in federal Germany to introduce direct democracy. And the first, in 1996, it was introduced, but with such high obstacles that it was fairly courageous for Mehr Demokratie to start an initiative. But it was, as Claudine said, incredible how the people really wanted to take part in politics. And there were long lines before the offices where they had to sign in for the change and to improve the laws, so it became more manageable to have initiative referendums. And we also introduced local referendums. Although in the city-state of Hamburg there are no real communal levels, and so all we can reach is recommendations to the state government. And even so, in those 20 years since we first started that, 145 initiative referendums took place. And Hamburg for a long time was very proud of being the most democratic city in Germany, but I have the feeling that now they are getting fed up with the people insisting on having their say on certain infrastructure projects and things like that.
And that's the today. I want to go past. Why was Hamburg last? Why was it a harder sell in Hamburg to get to 96? Or
well, it's much easier to rule if you can keep the people out. Yeah. And I think that was after East Germany became part of all of Germany, every state in Germany introduced direct democracy in their state constitutions. And so Hamburg could not very well stay out of this. Finally gave in and finally introduced direct democracy.
Daniel, so by 96, all the states, federal states, had it on the books. So what was it that changed? Is it unification? Was it that made it happen so fast, Daniel? I'm going to move to Daniel, get his voice in the room here.
Yeah, well, of course, one has to know, 1989, there was this peaceful revolution, we are the people.
Yeah.
This was what people were shouting at the streets. And then, of course, when the constitutional process of the 5 new East states developed, then they couldn't avoid to introduce at least some, sometimes badly designed, but they had to introduce direct democracy elements on all levels. So that was an easy strike somehow for us. But we had then, for example, in Thuringia, to make it better in big campaigns. It was also a very successful campaign with Ralf Uwe Beck. He's a pastor sitting there, and he got even the national prize for honorable citizens for doing that work to renew and make the democracy in Thuringia better. So this was very good for us that we had this peaceful revolution in 5 states which right away introduced direct democracy elements on all levels.
Pardon this question, because I think it's probably a pretty American question. And I want to start by saying it's very different, direct democracy and the plebiscite, where a leader, sometimes an authoritarian leader, uses the vote of the people for unfair and nefarious reasons. Was there any resistance given the use of the plebiscite in the Nazi era to this idea, to the idea of bringing direct democracy back?
Yes, of course. We had all the time had this discussion about the so-called Weimar experiences. Weimar, the first democracy in Germany, which lasted very shortly until Adolf Hitler took over. They had elements on the national level of direct democracy, but they had a very hard, the thresholds were much too high. But it was more a rumor. But Adolf Hitler held plebiscites, and this was, of course, all the time an argument against direct democracy. But we right away had very good teachers from Switzerland and also good thinkers, which said direct democracy should really come from the people and not from governments. So the initiator should always be people, because this is an instrument for people, not for governments. And we differentiate in plebiscites, as we call it, which brings very easy questions to people, very often in a propagandistic way, and real direct democracy with very intelligent designs and procedures and so on.
Okay, and I should have introduced Daniel. For those who don't know him, Daniel Schilly is one of the founders of Democracy International, over T, and we're here in part because of him. Thank you. I did want to, I want to go to, I'm never going to say the name right. Michael van der Looy, who's now managing director of Omnibus for Direct Democracy, which you should go see down on the other side of the wedding cake or the typewriter, whatever you may call it. You had a very remarkable photographic engineering and a photography, humanitarian work during the war in the former Yugoslavia. But how, this picture now in these states that have it, how similar is the process from state to state? Is there wide diversity as these states have, got the direct democracy and put it in place? Is it, or is it different, very different from state to state?
Yes, it is. You have to repeat the question.
Okay. Is there a German model, or are there competing models? Is there a Rhineland model versus a Bavarian model, essentially?
Yeah, maybe you
can. An American to help me, no. Well, I'm not prepared on that question.
Okay, sorry.
Why it is so different.
We'll step back. Why don't we go to your role in this and the omnibus and how you spread the word about this? Because is it as simple? Do other countries without this, do they need to get a bus, refit it, and going around? How is this word spread and support both for the rules and the practice of it and the establishment of it? How have you spread the word? Maybe that's a better question for you.
I'm sorry, but I don't get it acoustically.
I know, it is hard.
Okay, yeah, okay. Yes, we got an omnibus, you can see it and you can visit it. This omnibus is standing down there on Plaza Venezia, in front of the huge monument of Victor Emmanuel. And we came from Germany and had many stops in between. So we have been to friends in South Tyrol. We had a stop on the Brennerau at the border. Then in Bozen, then in Trient. Then we were in Vignola, in Bologna, and now here in Rome. And our omnibus is an element we use. Our company is called Omnibus für direkte Demokratie in Deutschland, Omnibus for Direct Democracy in Germany. And it's very nice for us, or interesting, that omnibus is a Latin word, and if you translate it, it says for all, with all, through all. And this omnibus, I don't know, I don't see Werner Küppers. You will see him in these days. This is the guy which is very colorful, with colorful clothes and walking bare feet. And he drove this omnibus now for 18 years. And he's living in this bus for 7 months a year, and he's driving from town to town in Germany. We are planning a route, and they are talking. There are mostly 3 or 5 people on board of this omnibus, and they are talking with the people in Germany. And in Europe, we made a big tour through Southeast Europe. We have been to Athens, to Istanbul, and through all the 12 countries in Eastern Europe with this omnibus. And a main issue of our work is that we would say art instead of politics. We are working from the position of art, and I'm not quite sure whether I will have the possibility to explain how, but you may ask me afterwards.
We will. That's important element of that. I want maybe Angelica could get to that previous question about looking at that map. I mean, you know, there are 24 states in the United States that have direct democracy, and some are similar, but there's some very different. When you look at that map, how do you, as an expert in direct democracy, look at it? What are there models that there's certain states are like this, certain states are like that in the way they do it?
First of all, I wanted to add to Michael the story of the omnibus. The omnibus helped us a lot in Hamburg. They supported us, and I admire their constant, quiet work, just driving from city to city, stopping over in public squares, talking to the people. I find it a wonderful educational tool, and it helped us a lot, and the omnibus always is welcome in Hamburg, and they always have young people on board who learn a lot about direct democracy too, and so we are very lucky. And what was your question again?
I'm curious, you know, I mean, if I were looking at a map of the US, I would talk about how direct democracy is very different in California, Oregon, Arizona, and Colorado than it is in some of the other states. It's very, very strong in those 4 states, much easier to and much more used than in a lot of other places. You could sort of see different models. Is that true of Germany? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we have in Germany 2 forms of direct democracy. The one is the initiative and referendum, normally 3 steps. The initiative, then the collection of signatures, and then the referendum. And the second form is obligatory constitutional referenda, top down, when you change the constitution. These are the 2 main forms. And there are huge differences in the different countries. One of the best countries are Hamburg, Berlin, Thüringen, Bavaria. And one of the least ones are Hessen or Saarland. Yeah?
What's good about the ones that you think are good?
Yeah, let's explain
Sure.
a little bit. The total of all initiatives on the states level in Germany is 320, but only 25 referenda. So you see, the quorum, the necessity, how much people have to vote and say yes, is different, is very different. In Bavaria, for example, you need only the majority, and in other countries, you need 50% of all the voters
to win.
To win.
Right.
This will never happen. So these are the differences.
Do you have turnout quorums like they're struggling with in Italy?
No.
No, okay.
But maybe for you as an American, it's interesting that after we were defeated, there was something of the powers, France, England, and all said, Germany must be a decentralized state. It never is allowed to be a centralistic unitarian state. So we have it in the constitution. It's also an eternity clause that we always have to be a decentralized state, but a federal state, and the states rule their constitution, which is of course great. We like it, but we are not allowed somehow by our constitution to change this because it's under the eternity clause, which is a very special German invention to protect us from dictatorship.
Eternity is a long time. Okay, so the places that you think are, go ahead, Anna.
I also would like to add that after the Second World War, those states which were occupied by American forces had it much easier to introduce some forms of direct democracy. And Bavaria was lucky to have their first prime minister who was in exile in Switzerland. And the two factors together made it possible to have direct democracy that early on.
So to my question there to Roman, it worked, the places are better, it's easier to use the process, it's more user-friendly. So what are the places where it's bad? Who needs some criticism here? What big localities, big states where they need to pick it up? I'm going to get you second, Dave.
Yeah, I already mentioned.
Yeah. What's wrong with them?
Hessen is one of the worst.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there are many countries where never a referendum took place, and these are the least ones.
Really?
And there we have to you differentiate between, we have, how you say this, like Hamburg and Berlin are states. They are not only towns, but they are city-states. Yes. Also Bremen. So you can't compare them with Bavaria, Baden-Württemberg, and North Rhine-Westphalia. This is the difference. But I think the most interesting thing is that many of the improvements, they don't fall from heaven. You need initiatives and organizations who do that kind of initiatives. And one of our learnings was that we have to focus as a civil society organization on democracy itself. Not only do environmental things or animal rights or things like that. And this was our learning at More Democracy, that we focus only on the democratic issues. So we, as More Democracy, together with the Omnibus, we did 40 campaigns for initiative and referendums in Germany, and we managed in 30 cases the improvement of binding rights on the local and on a state level. And I think that is great.
Okay. At this point, I want to give the Germans a break and bring in Dane Waters, who has just finished writing and it's sent to the printer and it's not quite out. This very important book, the Initiative Referendum Almanac. It's a global thing. If you get one of the cards, do you get 20% off? Is that real?
20% off, yes.
20% off. It's a big, expensive academic book, but 20% off. You travel the globe. You're spending a lot of time in Myanmar these days, on elephants. But I wanted to get you to respond, to tease out what you think is important in this story. This is a lot of, despite the struggles that we're about to get into today in the next round, this is a lot of direct democracy advance in a relatively short period of time. What are the lessons of it? How does it fit in the world?
If you look at the history in the United States, the advancement of the initiative and referendum process really took place during a 30-year period too, when you think about it, during the late 1800s and early 1900s. So when the passion exists for empowering the people, I think it's possible to make it happen. In relation to the rest of the world, I tell you one thing that's interesting is that when the worlds are opposites, like opposite day, in the United States, we've spent the last 30 years trying to protect what's already there. Trying to expand the initiative and referendum process in the United States has been basically, as Paul Jacob knows, has just been an extremely difficult thing. So what's impressive to me, and compared to the rest of the world, is how far the Germans have come. Listen, trust me, it's hard for me to say anything positive about the Germans, so I have to, just to preface that. But I have to, excluding some of you, those of you who like elephants, like Daniel, yeah. But I applaud the fact that the progress and that they've been able to accomplish, over the last 30 years, while really, when you look around the rest of the world, really outside of the United States, it's a very difficult road to hoe. So I think that, one thing I would say is that America can learn a lot from what the Germans are doing in regard to how to put together the foundation for direct democracy. But I will just close by saying that I think that the ability to make quick reforms in a short period of time is based upon an emotional opportunity. And I don't know if that's because of the East and the West coming together in Germany, what may it be, but I think that when the people see the opportunity and they're passionate about it, I think that presents the opportunity to really take hold and bring about change.
All right. So enough of all this stuff, which I hear is tough for Southern Europeans to take. The praise of Germany. We're going to move away from that. We're going to go to the present, and let's talk about the problems of today, the real problems and challenges of today in German direct democracy. I'd ask each of you the question: what's the biggest thing that's not working?
I think the biggest challenge is the fear of the politics of the citizen. You understand?
The fear of the citizen having the power.
Yeah, that's the most important thing.
And we have no initiative and referendum on a national level, because that is really missing. And that's why. And I think this is the right time to introduce the Global Forum. Bruno, please, can you listen just now? To introduce the Global Forum, of course, to Germany in 2020, because then I think we can celebrate together the introduction of national referenda in Germany, perhaps. Yeah?
It's an invitation. Joe.
Yes.
One question to you.
Yes.
Show me your T-shirt, the letters, please. I figured out.
This was something a joke. I got this shirt. I was taking my child on the LA Metro system, which was there because of direct democracy, a sales tax approved by the people twice, 2008, 2016, on the new, and to Chinatown, because my children are in a Mandarin language school. And I was walking to a little tienda of a guy I know who's originally from Puebla, Mexico, and this shirt was among his T-shirts on the wall in LA's Chinatown 2 weeks ago. I said, I'm monitoring that German panel. This is my shirt. So
thanks a lot.
So, thank you. I don't know what it means. Is it that you're angry or that you're not angry? What is the commentary? I didn't understand it. So
One of the cliches about Germans is that they are always in bad mood.
We don't know that.
No. But I must say this. So I think the history of post-World War II Germany is deeply connected, of course, to the European Union, to Europe. And Europe was founded here in Italy somehow, the modern Europe. And so since I think many politicians have the fear that the Germans would, if they have the national voting right on direct democracy, they would vote against Europe. And my proposal is right away, let us introduce direct democracy elements on the national level, of course in Germany, but also in the European Union as a whole. Because then it would be very, very interesting for all Europeans to be a European citizen, to be a national citizen, to be a regional citizen, and at the end also an individual citizen because I have also parliament in myself, which is always discussing him back and forward. Maybe this is my German anger, but I think it's normal that people are... But that's really my plan. let us introduce direct democracy element also in the European Union.
Michael, the omnibus is getting pretty old. Are you ready for that big of a circle around the continent?
Yes, sure. There are so many young people.
So I did want to ask about troubles. When I visited Hamburg last year, and Angelica and Manfred Brent, who many of you know, welcomed me, and Manfred let me sleep in his barn and drive his car very fast, like Jason Bourne, through the streets of Hamburg. There was a sense of a backsliding, though, of some political trickery and tyranny trying to undermine the usefulness and the utility of the process to people. Is that just a Hamburg thing, or is that an issue now for all of Germany?
I think we were so successful over a number of years with improving the democratic structures in Hamburg that now politicians and especially the administration, the institutions, are getting sick and tired of having to put up with referendums all the time. And so they not openly fight direct democracy, but they're silently undermining the procedures, meaning in Hamburg the constitution is that communal and state activities are not separate, so that means there is no real communal level, and that means that if people stand up for some improvements or against some giant project in their quarters, the city government can just skip it. And so that creates a lot of frustration among people who say direct democracy isn't worth anything, it doesn't help, and in the end the government does as they please. So that's not a very good development. And so there have been a few court decisions which made it even more complicated for us to be successful, and so we are going through really rough waters right now.
Do you agree, Roman?
Yeah, I agree, of course. I always agree with otherwise it would be hard
Bavaria
for me.
connected.
Because we're Bavarian, you know. This is thicker than blood. Blood, yes. But I think that is mainly a Hamburg thing. And I think from a little bit from a meta view, it's a little bit like a backslash. We had this in Bavaria too. Like you're very successful, then the system strikes a little bit back and then you go on. It's in that direction I can...
We never give up.
Yeah.
We never give up.
Yeah.
Is there any sign of anti-democratic forces in the country, or people who might want to limit the rights of others? I mean, we've seen in Switzerland votes on the minarets, maybe most famously. We've seen votes in my country to limit people's rights using the process. Do you see, particularly at a time of authoritarian rising in my country, it seems a little bit in yours from afar, that this is a tool that can be used by people who mean democracy harm?
Yeah, we have a new party in Germany because some years ago the Chancellor said our politics concerning the markets is without alternative. And that was not a good quote. And meanwhile, we have a party called Alternative for Germany. And this is a right-wing party, but they are totally in favor for direct democracy. And this sounds good, but on the other hand, all the left-wing and progressive people are now, oh, if they are for democracy, we are skeptical. So this right-wing thing is now reacting and triggering itself. But I think on the And this is only concerned the national level. On the local and on the states level, direct democracy is introduced and everybody accepts it. So there are small slight backs and push forwards, but I think the main struggle is on the national level. And we have meanwhile 7 parties in the parliament, and 6 of them want direct democracy. And we need a 2/3 majority to change the constitution. That's the way. We one time already had 61% in the German Bundestag voted in favor of direct democracy, and now we need again the 2/3 majority. And we try to manage it in that way that after an election you always have a coalition treaty, and you can only make politics on things which are in the coalition treaty, as you know. And we managed it that we put in direct democracy in the form that there should be an expert group who should think about how the parliamentarian democracy should be enhanced by direct and participatory democracy. So this is the case now. And now we don't want to let them alone, of course, because these are only 15 people, and we are now organizing the next 2 years a big participatory process to help them and to do a German-wide process based on sortition. So based on sortition, like the Citizens' Assembly, in 16 parts of the land, and we collect all these discussions and we put together it in a book of a deliberation book. We do this together with the German Bundestag, so the parliamentarians are with us, and then in 1 year there will be the Day of Democracy in autumn in front of the Bundestag, and we will hand over these proposals to the parliament.
And this process is underway?
It's on the way.
Wow.
Yeah, Claudine already talked to the, how you say, Bundespräsident, the chief of state, how you say this, the president, and to the president of the parliament, and they all are in favor of the process. So we as civil society invite the parliament to do this process together.
You invite the parliament to behave like a parliament?
No, yes, that's right, a little bit, yeah. No, because when only the citizens do it and you hand over something, they say, oh, thank you, and they put it under the table or under the carpet. But when they are invited and integrated in the process from the beginning on, and if they finance the process, they can't put the proposal away. That is our strategy.
Other big, I want to get the audience here into Dane one more time, but any other big ideas? We've heard some big ideas. Daniel's bringing the forum, obviously the work you're already doing on federal. Any other big ideas, Michael, Angelica, Daniel? Any? It's okay if the answer is
Small
no.
ideas.
Small idea, yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes smaller, it's big.
Yeah. On our tour now to Rome, we recognize how important it is that it comes from the people directly, not from top down, but from bottom up. And there are several regional processes also in Europe, for instance, the Catalonians, then we have been to South Tyrol and the Basque country, and so on and so on. And there is also something going on which is called the European Balcony Project. They want to establish a European Republic with regional, from the regions. And we recognized on this tour that everyone is the smallest region in the world. And because everyone's the smallest region in the world, it comes directly from every heart or mind that you establish the next bigger region, maybe the family, the next bigger region in the town, and so on and so on and so on. And I'm quite sure that the development will go like this in the end. So
what Roman told is maybe something like this, because the people come together and they work out the design, hopefully, of a new voting law in Germany. And so I can see there are a lot of regions in Europe and little towns, for instance, Vignola in Italy here, who did it already. They made the design of how they want to shape their environment.
And a quick word, and I want to get to Dane in the audience.
I just wanted to mention a very small but very promising project which we just started in Hamburg, that is workshops or get-together on literature on democracy. And apparently a lot of people are very interested in it because apparently not enough people know enough about basic democratic subjects. So we just started it and we are pleased about the reaction.
Thank you. Okay, so a final question to Dane. Now, Dane, I want you to put on your international cap. I know when you're not dodging hurricanes and state income taxes in Florida, you're out there in the world. You're traveling around, and sometimes you give advice to governments and political leaders in other parts of the world. If you were hired by a country to come in and give advice on how to establish and set up direct democracy, and sort of pulling from what we've heard, what would your advice be?
And by the way, you're all welcome to move to Florida, so you don't have to pay a state income tax. So I welcome all of you to move there. Now, I think that, listen, the key advice is, listen, the only way that direct democracy can exist in any country, in my opinion, is if those in power understand that the people are the ultimate sovereign, okay? And so when I go to countries, like several countries I've been to in the last couple of weeks, and I talk to people who are in leadership, and I talk to them and I say, hey, do you believe that the people are the sovereign? And they're like, no. Even one of them said, well, I believe in freedom as long as you can control it. I'm like, okay, well, let's you know, that's just those two statements don't go together. So the first thing is that I advise is that you have to have faith in the people. Now, there's been a lot of people in this audience, and you know, that I've talked to over the years who believe that initiative and referendum is great as long as you can control the outcome and you can limit this and you can limit that. You know, I'm a believer that either you have faith and trust in the people or you don't. If the people are the sovereign, they have just as much right to screw up as they do to save themselves. So my advice is always, and it's interesting you asked that question because I am currently in a position where we're having this conversation, is that you can't be, if you're afraid of the people, it's not going to happen because you're going to put so many limitations on it that it's not going to be a usable process. So I advise that A, you come to respect the fact that the people are the sovereign, and B, similar to what's being talked about here, is that we design a system that's inclusive because, you know, listen, people who are worried about money in the process and special interests in the process, so forth and so on, the reality is that the more requirements you put on it, the more restrictions you put on it, only the special interests and those people with access to money will be able to use it. So I'm a firm believer in what I advise is that let the people govern themselves, let representative government be there, you know, when it has to be there. There are checks and balances. I also advise that it's very important to have a strong, independent judiciary, and the judiciary, in my opinion, should serve as a check and balance on direct democracy. So those are the kind of things that I would advise.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're going to, this is going to be my Oprah part where we go back into the audience and get some questions. Bruno, can you help out a bit here? Here we go. Let's, someone we haven't heard from. Oh, there, Daniela first.
Thank you. First of all, Joe, it's to you. One comment, one question. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to tap into the experience of Germany, which really has never been the focus of our discussion and deliberation and so on so far. And also congratulations on this match of the German speakers, Germany being the elephant of the European Union. It makes a very good match with Dane Waters who is the expert on the elephants. So congratulations on this one, yes. Then I would like to ask the speakers, the panelists, what would be their take on a statement like this? Of course, we would all agree that good direct democracy, vibrant one, well-designed, would be normally based on a very good local self-governance tradition. But there is a statement like this that direct democracy, the good direct democracy, would take root and thrive only or predominantly in countries that are federative states like yours, America, US, the US and Germany, or Switzerland Confederation, and not in unitary state. What would be your comment on that?
Yeah. Here we have a question from Ireland.
Donald O'Bralacon, I'm a citizen in Ireland. I first of all want to support what Danny said about a European direct democracy, and I want to congratulate, which I gather were mainly German speakers who got the European Citizens Initiative in, which I know is only agenda setting, but I congratulate them on that. Anybody's interested in seeing a very strong argument for direct democracy at European level, a German MEP, then MEP Gerhard Hefner, organised hearings in Brussels in September 2012, and Andy Gross, who will be here, gave a very good, former Swiss MP, gave a very good 20-minute presentation on how to design direct democracy. It's available in English. Anybody wants to see it, I can give them the link if they get in touch with me afterwards. I have a point to make to Roman. Citizens' Assembly was set up by a government in Ireland, and 100 members, chairman appointed by the government, 66 citizens chosen at random by a polling company to represent age, sex, region and occupation, and 33 elected members, 29 from the Houses of Parliament in the Republic and 9 from Northern Ireland. That assembly, although it was given 8 topics to look at, although it was not on the agenda, that assembly voted 83% in favour of direct democracy. That means at least half the number of MPs voted in favour of direct democracy. It was not implemented, and there's no sign of it being implemented. I'm saying to you, if you're sitting down with elected politicians, as we've heard from Hamburg, they're very slippery people, and you've got to watch them very, very carefully.
A question here from Jonah.
Yeah. The first question is the 5 new states from eastern part. So when you're applying this kind of your activities on more democracy and direct democracy, is it helpful for them to be more integrative in your unification process? That was one thing I really want to know. And the second question is why those retarded states, such as Hamburg and Berlin, why do you think they are more successful other than citizens, some kind of a threat and efforts? So some kind of their existing party politics closely related with this kind of newly development on direct democracy.
Mm-hmm. And here a question from Greece.
Thank you. Congratulations to our German colleagues and allies on direct democracy. I'm George Kokas from Greek Direct Democracy Movement. And I would like to ask you, as you have all this special experience on a federative level of how Germany is working, and as some people said, it is more useful to bring direct democracy in federative states. Do you think that you could help us to make in the next Euro Parliament elections an attempt to express direct democracy for the new Europe, because the Lisbon Treaty is already in a very bad condition for countries, especially of the South. So I would propose you to advise us and assist us as the elephants of Europe, and with so much experience of 30 years, to make something common for the next Euro Parliament elections, as the Greens, who also had its origin in Germany, had the success to make a European Green Party. Thank you.
One more here.
I'm very intrigued by the omnibus framing or context of art rather than politics, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Okay, let's get back to it. Any of the questions you heard, go down. Feel free to take or address one. Start with Roman and go down the line.
Yeah, I want to respond to Donald from the Irish Friend. We are not copying the Irish Assembly. We're just learning the good things and we try to avoid the bad things. So we do a three-part process. The first is that we are doing a survey or a scoping, which issues should be treated. And there, in that part, we invite parliamentarians, experts, and citizens. Then in the core, where the proposals are discussed and where the real things are made, no politician will take place. These are 16 groups of 25 people all over the country, one central, in the rural areas, in the cities, and they discuss 4 days. And then in the third part, we hand it over, and then we plan 1 full year that we accompany the parliament, that they don't put it in the waste paper basket, but put it into life. These 4 steps we planned. So, and we are very keen to learn more about your experiences in Ireland. This would be very successful, helpful for us. That's the first thing. And the second to you, you said why in some countries is it more, some countries are more successful than others.
She was talking about Berlin and Bremen and Hamburg.
Yeah. So More Democracy is an NGO, and we have 35 employees and 9 offices, 10,000 members, 7,000 donors. So it's not the biggest organization. And in some countries, there are stronger organizations than in others. And this makes a big difference. Sometimes one committed person, like Ralf Uwe Beck in Turing, he started alone and did 2 referenda. Yeah, and of course he then organized the whole thing, or especially in Hamburg. So it's also a difference how much committed people you have in the core. This is, I think, one of the most important factors if you're successful or not.
Also, in Hamburg at first, the media thought it was a very interesting new thing that happened in Hamburg. And I think that's true for all the city-states, the 3 city-states in Germany. The active role the media play. And then all of a sudden they decided it was too difficult to really know what's going on, and they only have small staff nowadays, they're shrinking, and so they decided let's do away with that. And it's too complicated. And all of a sudden we had headlines like let's dump this Gaga law and things like that.
Michael, there was a question that came to you from Manju here from Oregon that was about the art, to expand on the art and the omnibus and how art connects us to democracy and direct democracy.
Yeah. We know that things tell us how they want to be. That's kind of art when you try to get able to listen or to feel how things or think or come into the thinking process, and you can open yourself and you're able or try to be able to get away from the things that you have been socialized in your biography, or if all the things from tradition just make yourself empty and then look at the things how they want to be. Ask the water, how does water want to be? Then it will tell you it wants to be clear. And it doesn't want to look like the sea with plastic in it, and so on and so on. And if you can establish this idea in yourself, that every piece of art tells you in the inner process while you are creating this piece, or while you are shaping your environment, then you learn to listen how things want to be. And that is the reason why we are talking about art and not politics. And we also would say that democracy is not politics.
Can I? You know, I want to go back to the question of like usage and why I can't, of course, attest to the German model, but like in the United States, when you talk about usage, you know, 60% of all initiatives have appeared in 5 states in the United States, even though 24 states have it. And the reason for that, it goes back to something we've discussed here. It's about the process and how it's defined. I mean, as Paul Jacob and his institute did polling around the country, and consistently the numbers are off the charts about the people wanting the ability to use the initiative process. But what is the ruling deciding factor as far as when it's used is whether the signature thresholds are excessively high, whether or not the legislature can overturn the will of the people, or whether or not there's a distribution requirement. So for any of you who are working to expand the initiative process, don't get upset if some areas use it more than others. But this just goes back to the key to discussion here, is that how you design the process is more critical than having the process. Because I know there's a situation in Texas back in 1920 where the citizens had the right to vote for the initiative process, but it required 25% of the population of the registered voters in order to use the process, and it was unusable. So they chose to vote it down. So I just want to emphasize the importance of the tools and mechanisms of the process, and not just focus on whether you have the process or not.
Or Daniel, a word on any of the questions that you might want to address?
I could say something to, there was a question about East Germany. When the wall fell down in 1988, 89, there was a strong power which came from there because they had round tables and talked about how they wanted to live together in future. And they had already made a constitution, and in this constitution there was direct democracy included. And that was one of the big issues, that we have direct democracy in every country now in Germany. So it was a very, very helpful thing. And another thing of the falling of the wall is it came suddenly. And this is something we should be aware of at any time, that things may change very suddenly.
Okay. Thank you. Daniel or Claudine, anything you want to add?
One thought, maybe. There's a big misunderstanding about democracy in Germany, in the mind of the politicians, because they think always they can do it better than the citizen. And this is the biggest problem. And we have to find ways to beweisen, to prove this is not true. And we need each other. We need the people in the parliament, and the parliament needs us. This is democracy. We have to work together.
Thank you. We have a couple more minutes. I think we can get a couple more comments from the audience, and then we want to go to our workshops.
We have a question.
Sì, io parlo in italiano.
I want to speak in Italian. Somebody who wants to speak in Italian? Actually, it's two questions. I come from South Tyrol. For the past 20 years, after a struggle, we are like a small Switzerland in Italy. We have the two basic tools of direct democracy in place. We have the initiative, the referendum initiative. And one of the issues that we have always had to deal with was what has just been mentioned. Political representation, because very often that is where the problem lies. So I would like to ask the speaker from Hamburg whether she can talk about this initiative for the electoral law in Hamburg, because I think it went through various phases. I mean, it was a real adventure. And another question for Germany, because they were talking about this eternal law. It is not a divine law, so how can you overcome this law? I mean, the impossibility of having this people's vote at the federal level.
You can do Italian? Deutsch? Bruno, come translate. She's going to ask a question in German.
Okay.
Ich denke, dass Demokratie und Abstimmungsrecht ist ein Menschenrecht und deswegen keine Politik. Es ist also man kann das nicht verhandeln, sondern Abstimmungsrechte gehören zu unseren neuen Menschenrechten, die wir uns erarbeiten müssen und erkämpfen müssen.
Okay, I think the right for the vote is not a political right, it's a human right, so there's nothing to negotiate.
Okay. Anyone who hasn't spoken today, who hasn't gotten a question, I want to... Over there, hold on.
Hey, John.
This will be the last. I think actually, right here. Go. Yeah.
Oh. Sì, Luca.
My name is Luca.
The earlier panel, Italians talked about technology, and nobody here talked about technology so much, and I really appreciate it. Because technology, I mean, we have to remember that the technology is one of the biggest factors that made people less political and less interested in books, less interested in participating in the politics. And the technology made us a better consumer than Democrats, participants in politics. So I was a little concerned this morning to hear people so keen on technology, and few of them really talked about this more fundamental issue. So it was very refreshing to hear about something like the omnibus. I've never heard of it, and the role of art in it. I mean, I'd like to learn more about it. My question is, the omnibus, how much did it cover in the country, within the country? How many, I don't know, kilometers, or how many towns, and how many squares?
And one last question here, and then we're going to end it.
Sì, Luca Raiteri di Più.
Luca Raiteri. I don't speak English well. Più Democrazia Italia. I think it is important to link direct democracy to federalism. Now, Switzerland is a model that could teach Europe. Germany, I think, well, in Germany, federalism helped a lot, and it's this community which is important. So citizens have to get involved at the level of the neighborhood. So it's important to give citizens the decision power bottom up. it can't always be other people who decide or politicians, decision makers from the top. It's citizens who live the territory, who know exactly what their needs are. So federalism means this sense of community. And this can be a model for Europe. Like Switzerland, like Germany. A model of federalism which is linked to direct democracy.
Thank you. Michael, to that very specific question, how much mileage have you put on the bus? How far has it gone?
The omnibus visits in the year about 100 cities in Germany, and maybe, I'm not quite sure how many kilometers it is in a year, but the important thing is the thing of the art. So if you want to know more about it, or everyone who wants to know more about it, after this panel there is a workshop of Johannes Stüttgen. He's the co-founder with Brigitte Krenkers of the Omnibus, and he will have a lecture down there about this specific topic, why art, we are working for art and not politics, or with the art and not for politics.
Thank you. And Elke, there was a direct question to you about the Hamburg election reform.
Yes. Just to give you an idea what can be achieved by direct democracy, we changed the electoral laws by referendum because before that you only could vote for a certain party, you only had one vote, and we said party programs are not enough. Party programs are implemented or not implemented by people, and therefore you should have the possibility to vote for people, maybe within a party, but not for just a party. And this idea was convincing enough to make us win. And now we have a much more complicated electoral law, but it is well accepted by the people, although our opponents used to say it's too complicated for people. People are not smart enough and people are not informed enough, which is not true.
Okay, thank you very much. And since it will probably be another 10 years before Bruno lets me do this again, let's please give these people especially an enthusiastic hand. Thank you. Thank you. And now some very, very important information. Please be quiet about our workshops, which we're going to go into now, our first workshop period.
Yes, so there we have 7 very interesting and very different workshops planned this afternoon. All the information on that is in the program. So one of them will be taking place here, and this one will be translated into Italian. There is also Italian translation in the participatory budgeting workshop that takes place in the Sala Pietro Cortona, which is in the museum. All the other workshops will take place in English. What is very important to know is that the workshop with Johannes Stüttgen from Omnibus will not take place in the Assessorata Roma Semplice room, as is noted in the program, but in the Sala Carroccio. You all have your badges, and on there is a very nice map. And so the Sala Carroccio is in the D building and not in the F building, as is noted in here. So I wish you all a very interesting rest of the day and very interesting workshops.
So be careful that there's a workshop here, there's a workshop in through here. There are workshops in 2 in 1 building that's towards out and towards the 1 towards the back. Then Cordova, right? There's Flavia and there's the no.
Sorry. So there is one workshop in here. There is a workshop in the room that is behind here that is called the Piccola Protomoteca. There is one workshop which is in the building out back, and then there is one workshop which is in the building out back downstairs. And then there is a workshop in the museum, and there is one workshop at the other side of the Palazzo Senatorio. It's a little bit complicated, but you can, if it's unclear, you can ask anybody who has a team badge to point you to the workshop that you would like to join.